There's a strong pull for businesses in all industries to create high performance cultures that attract and retain great employees while also driving results, which is really challenging these days. However, something breaks down between the desire for a better workplace and the practical application of daily tasks and communication. As a result, the goal of creating an employee centric organization doesn't come to fruition when these concepts leave the boardroom for implementation and they just kind of wane away. We need to be more intentional about communicating and building relationships as we fully integrate our organizational culture with strategy. Jeff also he provides a practical tools that I mentioned is Jeff Schiefelbein is it it's Bein, isn't it? I'm sorry.
Right.
Jeff Schiefelbein also provides practical tools and steps that any organization can take, regardless of their starting point, to improve communications, mindset, relationship structures, and more. His stories inspire action and challenge listeners to make changes that are immediate and permanent.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyan, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan, your host, the Lead Machine coach, and the founder of the Lead Machine Mastermind and Marketing Agency. I'm dedicating to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. And whether you're just starting out or taking your business to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality. Well, Jeff Schiefelbein, welcome to the show. Can you tell us just a little, tell our audience just a little bit about you and your company, Undivided Life?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank
Just
you.
as way of background about me. So married for 13 years to my beautiful wife, Amanda. Together, we are raising 7 young children. Our oldest is 10 years old and our youngest is about 4 months old.
Wow.
Uh, we love the meaningful chaos of life with the
Mhm.
priorities that we put in place, focusing first and foremost on our relationships individually with Christ, followed by our love and relationship with one another as spouses. And then below that becomes our relationship with our children and all else. And I purposely start there because a lot of people, if you were at a dinner party, say, tell me about you. What do you do? And I always go first to my vocation of father and spouse. And then eventually I'll get to the part where somebody pays me money to do something. I've had a very long history of either doing startups or turnarounds in every sector that you could kind of name, from public, private, small, large, um, organizations that are overtly Christian to some that are purely secular businesses. And over 25 years, I've been running virtually the same playbook over and over. It's not my playbook, but it's one that I know really well, so that we can build exactly what you talked about in that intro, right? This idea of I get to have my cake and eat it too, building really great, thriving cultures based on human dignity and the growth of the human being that also lead to scale and impact and profitability. Um, the company Undivided Life, this organization's less than 2 years old. I launched it with a business partner under the thesis that we could use this playbook to help people build better businesses that would be both more personal and more professional. So imagine having a private equity playbook with a soul. So
Hmm.
it was, how can we go and consult organizations? But because we love this playbook so much, we didn't stop there. We continue to do speaking and workshops and keynotes on the same topics and work on leadership development for folks. And then on the same side, we have a holding company where we are investing in organizations so we can go through kind of a buy, build, bless mentality. We're also launching organizations from scratch, because we also like operating businesses. So in the grand scheme of things, we are using more or less an operating system of how you would do business and use that as one of the gifts that God gave us, the gift of business administration and innovation. to impact as many people as we can while still holding all of our priorities, like I said earlier, God, wife, kids, everything else, holding those in the right place while we do it. So Undivided Life is both a name of a company and a way of actually operating a company.
That's awesome. I really, really like that description. Thank you. I couldn't have done better. Uh, if you're interested in booking Jeff for a talk, please contact him at Catholic Speakers Organization at catholicspeakers.com. And you can also find the link to Jeff's profile in the show notes, and you can connect with him a little bit later on. So, when in your journey did you realize that the importance of company culture was so important, and how did that like impact your expertise and your development along the way?
Yeah, great question. So it almost becomes a moment of looking in the rearview mirror is when I realized how important culture was. See, when I was in college, I ended up starting my first two nonprofits.
Mm,
One of them now is 25 years old and has been known for over 2 decades as the nation's largest program to reduce drunk driving in any college town. It's at Texas A&M University, and it's called Carpool. Well, I
mhm.
started working on Carpool when I was 20 years old, and I was able to find a way to connect all these dots from an innovative way of thinking to unleashing the human spirit, the human potential when people are working on something that's bigger than themselves and they have this shared goal and this human dignity at the core of everything that they do. And the organization was award winning and incredibly impactful, really from its very first couple months of being around. Well, if you take that experience and you kind of fast forward through my career, I ended up in a couple different stops. And the next thing I knew, I was sitting in the boardroom of an energy company in the deregulated energy space. Texas had just deregulated. And as I kept listening to everybody around me and the mistakes that they were kind of stumbling their way through, or the myopic ways in which they looked at what business was and why it exists, and I was thinking, wait a minute, these people are 10, 20, 30 years my senior. They know everything, right? These are the people you're looking up to. And I realized that many of them had never had the experiences that I had, even as a college kid starting nonprofit 501(c)(3)s. And it dawned on me that, oh, I through, you know, God's grace, a whole bunch of trial and error, and maybe the skills and gifts that I was given as a human being, I had this very unique view into why work exists, how to extrapolate value and meaningful challenge and this feeling of accomplishment from big groups of people, all when I was 20, 21, 22 years old. And here I was as a young executive looking in the rearview mirror and realizing, oh, that was my logic back then, but it's not everybody's logic. And most people probably don't come to that conclusion, as I found out. If they ever get there, it's usually later in their career that
Yeah.
somebody comes to realize they could have done it different. They could have loved and grown people around them while also being successful in their business. And they're not mutually exclusive. They actually are multiplicative if you put them together.
Yeah, carpool. Is you started that?
Did
What
started out
was what was the thing that made you start that? There must have been something that impacted you. A
something
real net
big.
something big.
Yes,
Yeah.
a pinnacle moment of my teenage years, if I may. I was starting my sophomore year at Texas A&M. I was a good kid from a good family, but I was making some pretty stupid mistakes.
Mm,
And one night was pulled over when I was speeding and arrested for driving while intoxicated. And Paul, the important part of this story is twofold. One, I was guilty, and it wasn't the first time I had been guilty, but I remember even in an inebriated state, thanking God that I was being given this moment to kind of have a death to self or a start over, if you will, because
yeah.
I knew that wasn't who I was or who I wanted to be. The other part of that story is I wasn't involved in an accident. And that's not because I'm better than anybody or that I deserve something better than anybody else. I, in fact, was at a Mothers Against Drunk Driving Victim Impact panel when a mother was speaking about her high school daughter, high school age, who was hit on the side of the road changing a flat tire by a drunk driver and killed on the scene. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that I couldn't name the difference between the guy who killed her and myself,
Mm.
other than here I was getting the second chance to listen to this mother's grief story. And God hit me with a lightning bolt moment of what I needed to go do. And I mean, a resolve that would outlast and have the fortitude against every roadblock that was ever put in the way. It told me that what I wanted to go do was impossible, and it was, but we did it anyways. And the result is over 300,000 people have used this program to get a free ride home, not to other bars, clubs, or parties in 25 years. And dozens of other programs have been launched throughout the United States, completely based on that original carpool model. So yes, my my worst night as a 19-year-old, the shame of being the youngest in my family and being the only one to ever go to jail, turns into a hallmark moment of God using my pain and my mistake and my suffering. It really is suffering for a young man to lose your license, lose the trust of your parents,
Yeah.
feel like an idiot, and use it for good and take that weakness and pull out his strength through my weakness. So that was a very big moment in my life, to say the least.
Yeah. And I know that was painful to go back to that, but that's like Saul on the road to Damascus when he was blinded by our Lord, and and he had this amazing transformation just like you did. And I just love that story because it's so important for people to recognize that it's never too late to change your ways and to make an impact in and to create amazing lives, amazing families, amazing businesses, and all for the glory of God. And so that's commendable. A lot of people have many of those experiences, uh, but they never change. They never change. And so,
Paul, don't you think, like, when you look back at, like, the college years, if you will, the 4 years that somebody was in college, they came out of those 4 years very different than where they started. Everybody can clearly see that.
yeah,
But we never mark other parts of our life in 4-year increments. We never say, "Oh, between 28 and 32, X, Y, and Z happened." But if
yeah,
you can take a mentality shift for a second and say, if you treat anything as if it's college, which college goes by in a flash, 4 years is nothing.
yeah,
If I'm 45 right now. If I treated between 45 and 49 as a college moment where I was gonna go and get straight A's in something, right? I wanted to be a better father. I wanted to grow in my knowledge of some part of the business world. I wanted to go deep into scripture and become, you know, more of a scholarly or at least knowledgeable gospel reader and understand the context and history of the Bible. You can't name something in 4 years if I put in, I'm going to go to the growth mindset that you teach people about. If I couldn't put in that effort of, I want to get a 4.0 over these 4 years, you would look drastically different by staying the course for 4 years.
mhm,
And so I think people need to hear that story all the time, which is you're going to be tested. But nothing's supposed to come to you easy. If it did, it's probably not the right thing to do. But if you can put in the effort and you can be open to where God is leading you, you can do some pretty amazing things over a 4-year period.
yeah. I like that.
You'll be a
Um,
bodybuilder.
yeah. Well, it might be too late for me on that, but no, I'm sure. I'm sure. Anyways, 4 years is like you said, not very long, not very long period of time. When you're in college, though, it seems like it's forever. But,
Gosh.
the younger you are, the longer years take. Uh, so I was interested in that carpool again. How you decided or how you were able to create that culture that was thriving like from the get-go. I mean, most companies never get that. I mean, I've worked for companies that had that at the beginning and lost it along the way, which is what we'll talk about in a few minutes. But what what was it what was the change? Or obviously that it was God driven, faith driven. So that would be my question. How did faith impact how you grew that company?
I, one of the gifts that I think I've had my entire life is understanding how to connect to where God is leading me. And it materializes usually as a peacefulness in my heart, even when perhaps in some situations the outside world is saying, this is impossible or this is on paper borderline crazy.
Mhm.
But it's a knowingness that I can feel and it's tangible to me. And that's how I usually know to go forward. I can tell stories of how I knew I was supposed to marry my wife and how we both have transversed growing a big family and starting multiple businesses. But going back to the carpool days, I was 19 years old, getting ready to turn 20,
Yeah.
and I started to just apply logic. what was it about other organizations that I liked or didn't like? With the other programs that I studied in the US, all of which in my mind were failures, why would they not work? Why would I not want to be a member of their organization? Why would I not want to be a college kid using their service? Would my example of my wife, who's a shy 5'4" small petite girl, would she feel comfortable getting a ride home from X, Y, or Z program or from ours? So it was just trying to look from every stakeholder lens.
Mm.
How would this thing actually be a win for everyone? Vendors, suppliers, the university, the community, the students using it, the students not using it, the members of the organization who had to go through competitive interview applications to be a part of it. So it was just this whole lens of what is the most logical way to make this good for everyone it touches, even good for the taxi cab companies that were willing to meet with us and have a relationship instead of make it contentious.
Mm.
That's how it started. But why did it stay? Why did it outlast, from a cultural standpoint, the graduation of a founder? And by the way, 100% turnover every 4 years. You're guaranteed
Yeah.
to have an entirely new crew of roughly 300 people running this organization. We were very meticulous and intense about building out our succession planning. So we had workbooks and business plans and guides for every single role that you could play within the organization. We made sure that if I was the head of fundraising or the head of nightly operations or the head of risk, that my role was being transitioned for 9 months before I stepped down. So most of the time that I was running my role, I had an apprentice who was learning the role, and then they step into the role and they're already doing the apprenticeship of who's going to replace them. So that succession plan was unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
Mm.
And then even as a young person running a young organization, we knew it was critical to have a mission that was clear, a vision that inspired people to act and that they knew was a stretch, but also attainable. And most importantly, the core values that we would never go outside of those bumper lanes. But within those, you were given the greatest freedom as a fully formed adult to just make the right decisions towards those mission, vision, and values. And we would deal with any mistake that came along the way, so long as it wasn't malicious. We would give people incredible autonomy, incredible empowerment. And when I really think about this, these things come from the gospel teachings of Christ. I'm a Catholic man, and I didn't know these words until later in life. But the Catholic Church has always studied work, and
Yeah.
great St. John Paul II, plenty of the great encyclicals of the last 200 years talk about work. And when you break down the language of work that the Catholic Church puts onto the gospel teachings of Christ, you start to see that it's important to have the common good as your principled approach, right? Conscious capitalism would call that a higher purpose, but we have the common good. We have subsidiarity, which means we're going to pass down the decision-making and authority as far down as we can within an organization where it's still capable of making those decisions so that we're empowering and growing people. We're going to be solidarity with the community, with the poor, with one another. We're going to act with justice. We're going to include just wages in a company like mine today. And so, and then at the end of the day, it's going to be dignity for all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
You operate with dignity when you're firing people, when you're punishing people, when you're telling somebody that they didn't get the job or they didn't even make it to the next cut. And when you're doing every other party business, you operate with dignity, and that takes great intention. So I know I'm rambling there, but it's almost like I use this weird form of logic early on that nobody else was using in their organizations, and then started to solidify it with the right succession planning and the right knowledge of where it all came from.
And you, obviously you took what you learned back then. Of course, it was an iterative process as you discovered. Of course, you made mistakes along the way, but you took that and you moved it forward into the rest of the businesses that you've been involved with. And you mentioned a playbook. Is that something that developed out of this, or is it something that you co-developed with someone else, or how did that come to play?
So the way I think about the playbook is it's always being developed. And it's certainly
Yeah.
developed starting with the Carpool program and then moving its way forward. In my career, something really interesting happened. When Texas deregulated the electricity grid, the first year of it was kind of a giant mess. And I got to join in year kind of 2 of deregulation. And I joined in with a really big utility company that had a retail affiliate now. All of a sudden they had to care about customers and they had to care about providing good service. And I realized that I was part of a robust organization with a lot of clients and deep pockets, but almost no knowledge of how to be client friendly and innovative in this marketplace. And so to make impact, I was 24, 25 years old. I wasn't sure what to do. I just went back and I said, okay, what worked in Carpool? Why is Carpool such a success? And I started replaying those things. Oh, I treat people as fully formed adults, meaning I'm not going to micromanage their lives. I'm actually just going to trust them. I would celebrate people in success, but more importantly, in failure, because I thought people learned more when they made honest mistakes or they had an expectation that they didn't reach, because then we could dig into how did that happen? Where was your brain? What did you think about from timeline and resources? I started thinking about the way that you communicate. I've made every mistake in communicating poorly, in acting like yelling is some form of leadership. I've done all of the rookie mistakes in fast forward when I was 20 years old, so that by the time I was 24, I started to grow a team that felt that together they could accomplish more than they ever could apart, who started to treat sales and service as a team sport, who would say, thank God it's Monday. I can't wait to get to work. That becomes an attraction, right? A beacon that all these other people in the organization start to kind of latch onto, because the scoreboard of how well we're performing and the scoreboard of the joy that's coming out of our work group is attractive. It's like evangelization. If the faith is attractive because you're living it fully and joyfully and completely, then other people want to know where that comes from. They want to be accompanied on this journey with you. So anyways, all that, I don't even know where I'm going with this other than I'm rambling. Oh, the playbook. So
Yeah.
I took it from Carpool to First Choice Power. We had so much success in that organization. We built the best technology in the deregulated market space. We grew our commercial sales department at an unprecedented clip. We had people excited to come and join our sales meetings on Monday morning that weren't even on the sales team, because they didn't want to miss out on the book club discussions and the other debates that we were going to have, because they knew we were forming a stronger culture. That business ended up selling for a giant premium. Our culture was one of the primary reasons why it sold for about 100 million more than was expected. And then we took that playbook and started another business 2 days later after it sold, using the exact same principles. And it was so easy to attract people, because the first 10 names we wrote down and said, if we could recruit any of these people, we'd be off to a good start. All 10 of them said yes. And we launched an energy brokerage and consulting firm. And then I just kept using this playbook. How can I bring it to the nonprofit sector, to my local parish, to the for-profit friend of mine who's trying to get something off the ground and needs a little nudge or a little help putting the right structure in place. But again, I didn't write the playbook. It's truly, if you understand the gospel teachings of Christ as expressed through the teachings of the social teachings of the Catholic Church, I'm just running that playbook. And the document, I'm going to grab this. The document that shows this better than anything was a thing called the Vocation of the Business Leader. This is only a 30-page free PDF. You can look it up online. But the Vocation of the Business Leader was the time where I had a million aha moments that the words on the page matched the reality of what I was living. A lot of business books I love. That's one that I look to and I say, that's easily a playbook to understand why what we've done over and over is successful.
Yeah, I like that. And the thing that when we talk about this topic, it's not, it is about God. It is about the truth. It is about the Bible, but you don't have to, everyone can be part of it.
Yes.
There's not this us versus them, Protestant versus Catholic, or secular versus, the dark side versus the light side. It's the truth. It's in the middle. It's the balance in the middle, which is striking to me. It's very subtle, though. It's very subtle. So I applaud you for using those principles, and it's really just human connection. And you mentioned intentionality and communication a lot, and so let's dive in a little bit deeper into the intentionality of how a leader could approach and say, okay, my company's a mess. I'm at 10 million or 15 million or whatever, or 1 million, and I've got to build a team and things are just not going south. What do I do? Where do I start?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to that, right? And we're all in
Yeah.
different starting places. But if you think about the building blocks of any team or any culture, it's always communication and relationship building. And so there are changes we can make in our mindset towards those things, in the actual words we're using, in the structures we're putting in place that will either reinforce growth and create a better version of teamwork, or there's things that we can do that deteriorate and deconstruct each one of those steps. So there was a book that I read. Again, I know I bring up books all the time, but I always have them just sitting right here because I love all these. So this one's called Tribal Leadership, and it's talking about how to build thriving company cultures. And you can see I have this one tabbed, and I've taught classes on this. Tribal leadership walks through these different stages of an organization, going from level 3 tribes that say I'm great and you're not, and most of our organizations are that way. Level 4 tribes get into we're great and they're not, so you just have a formidable opponent, but you're doing stuff collectively together that's more enjoyable and more impactful. And then level 5 is a whole different stage. You break through the watermark line because you're competing with what's possible. You're doing something that nobody realized they could do until you unlocked all these secrets. Well, what I love about this book, when I marry it up with some of the teachings that I talked about from Vocation of the Business Leader, it really is going through how my words help to frame my mindset. And when I'm using more intentional wording and building people up in my conversations, I could have a different output from the person I'm talking to. I can empower them and give them dignity. And I'll give you some examples. Think about the times when I am watching a fight kind of break out over days or weeks through email in an organization, and everybody's replying to all, and everybody's kind of pointing out, nitpicking different things. And you go and you meet with every individual, and their answer will be, I wasn't trying to hurt his feelings. I wasn't trying to attack Paul. And in the spectrum of intentionality, I believe they're true. Like there's this idea that I'm trying to hurt Paul. There's this place where I'm not trying to hurt his feelings, but there's nobody talking about I went out of my way to make sure that there was clarity and that I was building Paul up, or that I understood the right time to email, or what were we even talking about in this debate here that got off kilter. And so what if we, instead of playing in this murky middle, move towards an intentionality of trying to build understanding and clarity, trying to build healthy debates without quarreling, and remove the narrative that's in people's heads so we can get back in the game by having the language around coaching, the language around how to deliver and receive those difficult conversations and feedback. Now, all of a sudden, people don't have to play in their brain about what did Paul or Jeff mean in this. We can actually just be clear with one another. And when we're not, we can engage in the language that I say, Paul, when you get a few minutes, I have some coaching I'd like to go to share with you. Can you let me know when a good time would be? Not giving you the chance to A, accept that invitation, B, clear your head if there's anything that you're currently working on, or C, tell me when a good time would be, so that we're able to square up and have a great conversation. Now in that, I'm going to use the right language and approach so that you and I can go, we don't have to agree on everything, but we can be highly aligned. And that way we can sprint together and trust each other and not feel like we're out to get each other, which happens all the time. So there's a lot of little language pieces that people don't even realize that they're doing or saying along the way that can create that construction versus destruction. An example I give all the time that I love is how many times somebody will tell you, I did all this work, I have these options for you, and your answer as a boss is, I don't care, just do whatever. And it's so deflating to this person who just put in all this work. But if we could just change that narrative to say, I trust you, do what you think is best, I'm using the same amount of energy to pump this person full of what I wanted to anyways, which is, I don't want to make this decision. I don't even want to be tied up in it. You go get them. You can shift a lot of those mindsets, even about what is work and what are the tasks in front of us, be something that we get to do, to be something that's a blessing in our lives, and to understand that even up to including termination of somebody is a chance to be a blessing to others in the way that we approach those events and everything prior to that as well. And so maybe I'm jumping around a little bit again, but the intentionality behind this is when you can create this level of leadership and not just management, you're unlocking human potential, because now people aren't afraid of losing their job. they're afraid of missing out on a day of work because it's fun and it's exhilarating, and they're solving problems together even on the days they get their butt handed to them, and have to pick it back up and keep going because it's a team now.
Yeah, and one of the things that you just touched on was that the dehumanization of your culture and not even realizing it, not even intentionally doing it. Can you give some more examples of that and how maybe we can turn that around in
Sure,
addition
here's
to this great example here?
yeah, I love the one that says, we believe in work-life balance.
Mhm.
Family comes first, and people have all these rah-rah things that they talk about. But in a group of 5 or 6 people, the boss likes to work on Saturday mornings and sends out the email to the 5 or 6 people and says, "Don't read this until Monday," but still sends the email and asks the questions about the account that was lost in this upcoming pitch that they have. Next thing you know, 2 or 3 people start responding, and they're talking about why we lost that account, what Jeff and Paul did that same week that messed up something with a client. Now, Jeff is at soccer because I have 7 kids. And when I finally look at my email in the afternoon, I feel guilty, even though we're not supposed to read this until Monday. The human nature part of me immediately snaps in and I defend myself. I point out the things I've done right. Now it's a race to see who can work the latest on Saturday, the earliest on Sunday. So we believe in work-life balance and taking vacations, but make sure that you're answering those emails. Your boss is going to send them to you at all hours and nights. Your boss even tells you, which by the way, why don't you work on Saturday but delay delivery? Or your boss says, I'm going on vacation, but I'll still be available the entire time. I'll let you know the days that I'm hiking because I might have intermittent cell service. Like, what message is that sending to the newly married, young woman who's 3 years out of college, that when she goes on vacation, she better be on the routine Zoom calls and she better be available and let us know when you're going hiking because your cell service doesn't work. Like, we've just built the wrong structures. We're dehumanizing work. And you could say the same thing about our leave policies. You could say the same thing um, about the way we talk about people in closed door meetings, as if that somehow makes it okay to say things that are not appropriate about people. I mean, it's kind of rampant in our culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, and some I work with an organization, and the employees are afraid to bring up, and we have there's regular meetings, and uh, the employees are afraid to bring things up because either nothing they feel like nothing will ever be done about it, which is not really the truth. The leadership is looking for feedback, and they don't want to bring things up because their peers are going to look down on them because sometimes they're saying so and so did this and this is what's happened and can't we fix it? And so I think blaming the system or having a system that you can blame is more important than having a person that you can blame. And so, can you talk a little bit more about how maybe having systems and systems that you can put together that can help along with the communication and with the growth culture of the company?
Sure. I think every organization should seriously consider this concept of having a culture of coaching so that
Mhm.
coaching, and I don't mean it has to be a professional coach, although if somebody gets a chance to work with someone like you, that's a major bonus because it's your primary focus. And I do think your high performers and your executives should look to folks like you as their coach. But even within an organization, the idea that people who have been there or who are veterans are in coaching relationships, or if I'm the head of an of one of the divisions, I'm still coaching people in other divisions. And what I'm really doing is helping them to unlock their performance and effectiveness. I'm not trying to coach them on the specific mechanics of the job that they're doing. I think their direct supervisor does that. But creating this culture where everyone in the organization is receiving regular coaching throughout a year at a regular cadence, where the coaching is also part of my own formation. If I'm a coach, it's helping me, just like a teacher. I become the best student because I have to learn the material in order to teach it to you. It's helping me to become a better player within the organization. So creating that cadence gives people an outlet for real discussion. It also helps you to look back to them. And when that person's complaining and saying, so and so did this and it's causing these issues, and so did this. And as a coach, I can say, and what did they say when you shared with them how you felt? What did they say when you brought to them that you didn't like the way that played out? And you'll usually find that people aren't engaging in any real conversation. They're just engaging in behind the scenes complaining. So now I'm going to equip
Yeah.
them. Their homework now is to take this step in engaging their peer or to look to solve this part of their issue. Because anytime we're just running up every problem to the next level up, we're actually creating a pretty toxic culture, even as it's both sides have a lot to do with it. But we can own that even if we're just the employee and not the leader. So when I think about structures, I would say create a culture of coaching. I think that's critical.
Mm.
Also, though, as leaders, you kind of said this, that organization is willing to make changes and wants to. Don't just make changes. Clearly communicate before, during, and after the change where it came from. So, for example,
Mm.
you can ask the questions that you probably generally know the answer to. 98% accuracy on a couple questions that I'm going to ask my group. They give the feedback. I listen to it. I keep an open mind for the parts that I wasn't considering. And then, where and when possible, we both act or show that we're investing in future action and tell them it's because of the feedback they gave and tie it back to the work they're doing and the impact that they're having. And then after it's done, remind them again. The book Culture Code talks about, I know I go to books all the time. It talks about this police force had a bad culture. Finally, the new police chief said, well, what's some of the things you're upset about? And they rattled off a bunch of stuff. And a couple weeks later, there was a security fence around their parking lot that cost $8,000. And nobody could believe that the police chief actually listened to them. And what he did is he made sure that they knew it was because of their feedback and it was $8,000. It was something he knew he could do quickly, that he was building trust, pieces of that trust bridge so that the narrative would change internally.
Yeah, and when you mentioned trust, I thought about, okay, so what having this kind of culture, how does it impact the clients and the customers that you're dealing with? I mean, you had that great example of the energy company. How did that uh, this new culture? They probably were stunned when they said, "Oh, you're actually listening to me." You see
Yeah.
this so often when companies grow and or they change ownership, and then all of a sudden the food's bad, the service is bad, you can't their hours change, you know, all this stuff happens and for no reason. So
My
I'm
business
rambling.
part my business partner left a really great private equity firm that actually had a soul, by the way. It's rare.
Yeah.
And the story that they used that I loved was an organization, a manufacturing organization was purchased and people were afraid of the new ownership. The new ownership comes in, asks a bunch of questions and realizes that these people are wearing old work boots. And, a very important part of their safety is their work boots.
Yeah.
And so they said every year, everybody gets a brand new pair of work boots starting right now and bought everybody, whatever it was, a $120 pair of work
Yeah.
boots.
Mhm.
It blew everybody away that they were heard and cared about. And you know what happened? They started getting applications left and right by all of those people's friends that had never worked for an organization that would buy them shoes. And
Wow.
here we're grappling with, really large, complex, like trying to come up with the new thing for people. And what if we just bought them new shoes so that they could be safe and comfortable at work?
Yeah.
Wasn't that it's science?
Wow. And so that helped build up the company with some great people. And you mentioned way back in the day of Carpool, you had a lengthy process of bringing people on. And how does your playbook work to attract and to vet the right people?
Yeah, the attraction part ends up being just an extremely natural outcome of this, right? If people
Yeah.
have experienced what it's like to either be directly involved or to know somebody involved in an organization that feels magnanimous, where it's almost as if your good is willed by the others just for the sake of your good and not for some sort of a financial return that you're invested in because of your human dignity, just your personhood is why people care about you. That word starts to get out pretty fast. As a matter of fact, at the energy company, the brokerage company we started, we had industry veterans after 20 years of being in the same company, proactively calling us, reaching out to me and saying, I've got to know more. I thought for sure this wouldn't last. Every time I lose a deal to you or talk to one of your people or meet a client of yours, it's resoundingly positive, and I would love to be in an environment like that. So that company started growing with the best talent in the industry for those exact same reasons. And then the question of like, how does that, I think the second question is like, how do you create the staying power around that? I'll go back to
Yeah.
coaching. I think that when you have a culture that says, instead of just sitting here ranking you at the end of the year, 1 through 5, and giving you a bonus and a raise based on some bell curve, what if at the end of the year, you were getting the most formative 360 coaching exercise from a peer and an owner and somebody in the operations department? In other words, like a 4-person holistic coaching that wasn't about your raise and it wasn't about your next bonus. It was actually just about helping you to understand from different points of view your strengths, your weaknesses, the community conversation about you, and the secret that would lead to breakthrough results. And you were being trained on how to be a recipient of that level of love and contribution by not being defensive and not trying to rationalize, but instead just receiving that other people are giving you this gift. Those things become the hallmarks of creating a culture that outlasts any person or personality.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. One of the things that I was thinking about while we were talking about this is when you have a company that I mentioned earlier that is maybe in distress, and do you get pushback when people when they say they look to you for help? Uh, they say, "Oh, this will never work," or what are some of the challenges that they have in changing things around? Because everyone has to start where they're at, and but it seems like a real big challenge. It'd almost be better to start from the beginning, like you did Carpool, and have that intentionality and that structure already in place. But we don't have that luxury. What are some of the
Sure.
pushback things, and what are some things that we can do to
Well,
success?
first pushback is people that think culture is some nice to have part of HR related to birthday parties
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
anniversaries. And they mistake a happy hour as being some part of a formidable culture building moment instead of just something that organically should happen because people like to gather. So by taking culture and putting it into one bucket or one part of HR, they miss the part that culture is truly part of strategy. That strategy and culture to me are intertwined, interconnected components of building a thriving organization and building up people at the same time. So therefore, from CEO to every leader, culture is everybody's responsibility, not somebody's responsibility. Um, on top of that, I think people get stuck into this mindset of what is and is not possible. And they'll use phrases like, that could never happen. And this person will never do this. And I've always struggled. And when they speak in absolutes, they think in absolutes. And so a lot of the initial coaching is helping people to see that there is a world of possibilities, even if they're slim, that looks different than the world you're in now. So I often think, and
mm,
most of the time, and sometimes, are a place that I can soften those corners so that a different outcome is possible. And then I can invite them to explore what would a different outcome look like and how can we work our way backwards to changing things today to get there. But it comes back to what we said about the 4.0. You also have to have the fortitude to know it's still going to get ugly. The
yeah,
the bad toxic things that happened in your culture for the last 5 years aren't going away just because we said culture is important.
right.
You'll take some steps back. You'll even have some things completely fall apart. And that's okay because we have a goal and a mission and we're on it together. And some people aren't going to make it because they're in a different stage of life or the organization has changed. That doesn't make that person good or bad. It just becomes part of what happens next.
Yeah, and I think that nothing that's really important is possible without some sort of struggle and some, you're going to fail a little bit, and it's sort of there's a bit of suffering involved, and but yeah, at the end, it's still the common good is a good goal.
I
So
completely agree, and I think that when you have that in mind, you start to realize that even money is just an outcome of producing a service or good that is valuable to somebody else and can't be a goal, because if it's a goal, it's shallow and short-sighted, and it misses the part where you're gonna wake up every day and plow through this work. You might as well have more meaning and more substance than just it's for money. Money's an outcome.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up, Jeff. What are three things that our listeners and viewers can do today to put these ideas into action?
Yeah, I'm going to put this into three things to be. My first is to be present. I think we live in a distracted world. The more present I can be to the person in front of me, the more likely I am to connect with them on a human level and for us to find common ground or ways that we can communicate better together. So be present. The second one is to be curious. Just because I have strongly held beliefs and follow a certain religious belief, that doesn't mean that I should stop being curious about what makes other people tick. Where do they get their energy from? What does the cadence of their year look like and what's draining them? And as I'm curious about them, I'm creating deeper relationship that allows us to be in dialogue that goes much further together so we can build together. We can trust each other, even if we don't practice the same faith together. And then the last is to be prayerful. And I say this because I think we've also slipped into an emoji world where it's really easy to put up prayer hands all the time or to say praying for you.
Mhm.
And that is a very weak and not important action compared to praying and praying for others and praying for the discernment of where you're supposed to move next or do next or say yes or no next. And when we make that time for prayer, then the rest of our time frees up so that we can actually be clear and effective and present in everything else that we're doing. So daily prayer.
Yeah, and I like the focus on me to be. You who you're going to become is who your company is going to become if you're the leader of it. If you focus on yourself first and you be that person that you'd like to become and start being that today, then great things are going to happen. And
You
so
probably heard
I
this. My old coach said we're human beings, not human doings.
right.
And I just loved it. Like, how are you being right now?
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
curious about being present. So 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So is there any way that people can get a glimpse of the playbook that you're talking about? Connect
You
with
bet.
you?
I'll tell you what. So we do have on LinkedIn, I write content like this every single day. So I know it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Please follow along. Our company's website is fun. It's undivided.life. So if you go to undivided.life, we have a weekly newsletter where we're sharing a lot of these thoughts as well. But one of the things that has really worked out well is we ended up recording a pretty in-depth series of leadership development courses called uh, um, Culture Foundations. Sorry. So it's like a people-centric leadership development. Culture Foundations has 6 different courses. We've been able to sell this as a bundle or individually to people, and it really drives some of these conversations into my own life. As a student, you go through workbooks, you go through examples, you go through different studies that you can do as you're growing in any one of these features. And we have a lot of companies that are coming along and they're getting culture foundations for their leadership, or there's a utility district nearby that just got it for all 40 of their employees. So consider that it's something people can do at their own pace, but it's like being coached without having the every 2 weeks showing up for an hour. It's more at your own pace.
Oh, I like it.
And of course,
And
Catholic, you and I connected through there. Catholic Speakers has great resources,
yeah.
and I'm one of the speakers listed on there.
Yeah. And if you're interested in booking Jeff for a talk or for a podcast or for some sort of appearance of any kind, just contact Catholic Speakers Organization, which is catholicspeakers.com. And again, you can find Jeff's profile on LinkedIn and a link to his profile on Catholic Speakers, as well as his website. It's undivided.life. And it's not .com, it's .life. It's one of those
That's right.
new 3.0 web domains. So,
That's right.
well, Jeff, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to have you on the show today. And remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal until next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan and Jeff Schiefelbein. Thank you so much. And
Thanks,
God
Paul.
bless.
Bless you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyan, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. And Enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.